Just because summer's over and the summer crops are finished doesn't mean to say we have to stop growing. The beauty of having a polytunnel is you can extend your growing season right through the winter. So today we're going to tidy the polytunnel up and get it prepped for winter crops. Hi, welcome to This Future-Proof Life. My name's Paul and welcome to my polytunnel. I love having a polytunnel. It's a fantastic thing, particularly in a temperate climate like the UK, because it allows you to not only grow crops like tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers particularly, and aubergines that love lots of warmth in the summertime, but it also allows you in the wintertime to continue the growing season. You can grow all sorts of salads and mustard crops, radishes, herbs, all sorts of things that you enjoy in the summer. You can also enjoy it fresh in the winter. Particularly on a dark, cold winter's day, there is nothing better than being able to have a lovely fresh salad direct from the garden. So today we're going to tidy the polytunnel up, get rid of the old crops. We're going to give it a bit of a clean, and then we're going to plant all the salads and the seedlings that I've been growing over the last month, get them in the ground and start enjoying our produce right through the winter. Okay, so the first job is to harvest the remaining veg that's still in the polytunnel. Once I've done that, I can then get rid of the old plants and get moving forward. Well, that's a pretty good haul. We've got loads of tomatoes, we've got aubergines, some chilies and some peppers, and even a few gnarly old cucumbers, which will still be good to eat. So for the dregs, that's a pretty good haul. That's great. Any of the stuff that isn't completely ripe, we'll stick in a windowsill and they'll ripen up over the next couple of weeks. And at least we get to enjoy a little bit more of this amazing stuff that we've enjoyed all summer. Okay, so it's time to get rid of the old plants. I don't want to pull them straight out of the ground because that will disrupt the beds, and these are no-dig beds, so I want to disrupt them as little as I can. But also plants tend to keep their nutrients, or a lot of their nutrients, in their roots. So if I cut the plants off at the base and leave the roots in, then the roots will break down. That adds to the organic matter of the beds, but it also means that we retain a lot of those nutrients in the beds. You can see here how I managed to suspend the tomato plants and the cucumbers all the way up the height of the polytunnel. Basically, I take polypropylene string and tie a few knots in one end of it, and then I place that, when I create a little bowl to put the original seedlings in, I lay the string with the knot in it underneath the seedling, plant the seedling on top, pack it down, and then over time the seedling's roots grow over the string and they hold on to the little knot, and it means that even when there's a bit of weight put on the string can't pull out. Then you tie the other end of the string to one of the crop bars at the top of the polytunnel, and you keep it pretty taut. And as time goes on, you wrap the tomato plant, as it grows and the head starts to rise, you wrap it round the string, and that will basically suspend it right up to the point where it reaches the crop bar at the top. You can see that we basically have 3 crop bars in the polytunnel. We have one on each side and then one in the middle of the tunnel. And that means that, I mean, these are at least 6 foot high. That means that we can suspend tomato plants and cucumbers all the way from floor to ceiling. And also, even where we have aubergines, we're using strings to suspend them from the ground there as well. So it means that you can end up with lots and lots of trusses on each of the vines and lots of fruit. So you can see here we've used exactly the same system for aubergines, except that it's a double string. It's a V shape tied onto the crop bars at the top, and again you pick off the side shoots of the plant, but apart from 2 stems, so you encourage 2 stems to grow from the aubergine, each of the aubergine plants, and then as the stems grow you wrap them around the string, and that suspends the plant, particularly because aubergines can get really heavy, but that's a great way of suspending it. It's really strong, and as the plant grows up you get loads of fruit hanging down. Okay, there we have it. So it's empty. It's weird after all this time having so much foliage and plants in here and everything for it now to be empty. But that's it gone, making space for the winter crops. Okay, so now that I've pulled all the stalks out of the polytunnel, I want to stick them in the compost bin, but they're just too woody to go in the compost bin. They wouldn't break down quick enough. You can crush them if you go through them manually, piece by piece, and break them down. That cracks the sort of fibers and does make it a little bit easier for the microbes in your compost bin to break them down. But the simplest thing to do is to shred them. So I have an electric shredder here which basically makes short work of the whole thing. It's fantastic. I'll leave a link to that in the description of the video. So you can see that the machine's basically broken down all the woody stems and material down into small enough pieces that the microbes can break that down further in the compost bin and to compost it properly. Now I just need to chuck it in the compost bin. So a really important job at this time of year is to clean the outside of the polytunnel. Obviously through the course of the year with rain and wind and dust and things like that, the outside gets a little bit dirty, and that can really affect the amount of light that gets through the plastic skin to the plants. Obviously we want as much light as possible, so this time of year when you're basically transitioning after the growing season is a great time to give it a really good wash. Just use a bucket of soapy water and wash down the outside, making sure that you get rid of all the dirt. Okay, so that's the sides done, but the most important bit, but also the hardest bit, is the top of the polytunnel. But there's a trick to that. What you need to do is you need to take 2 old sheets, tie them together so that it forms basically one long sheet, and then you need a bit of help from someone, and we're basically going to soak this in soapy water again and then drag it up and down the top of the polytunnel, and that way we'll reach all the hard to get areas and make sure that the top is nice and clean so that sunlight can get right through. Okay, so it's a couple of days later. As you can see, I've tidied up the polytunnel, got rid of all the mess, and I've also top dressed these beds with homegrown compost that we've created over the last sort of 6 months to a year. That basically will feed these no-dig beds for the next season, both for the winter crop that I put in now and then also for the summer crops of tomatoes and aubergines and things like that. So really high quality homegrown compost is the very best way to feed the beds, and the aim with no-dig growing is, rather than feeding the plants with liquid feed and things like that, you don't need to do that. You just feed the beds themselves. That feeds the microbes and the mycelium within the no-dig beds, and they in turn feed your plants. Okay, so the final stage of this has been planting the seedlings that I sowed a month ago. Basically, I've got a choice of different winter salads and some herbs. The aim with the salads is to use them as cut and come again. So you sort of sow quite a few plants and then you take individual leaves from each of the plants, and that way the plant, rather than getting cut and killed each time that you harvest, it will keep growing more leaves, and you basically have a sort of sustainable source of salad right through the winter. So I've chosen a sort of combination of different sort of salad crops, which are good for bulking out salads. They also lots of different flavors. Some are a bit spicy, and it just makes for a really interesting salad. I'll leave a list down in the description for everything that we've sowed and that's going here in the polytunnel. I've also decided to try a bit of an experiment this year with herbs, so I'm growing flat leaf parsley and coriander. And I'm actually also doing some spring onions just to see whether they'll grow over the winter time in the polytunnel. We already grow them out in the kitchen garden outside, but obviously they're now coming to the sort of end of their summer run. You can see here that I'm also making a bit of an experiment to try and reduce the amount of slugs. This crop is Valdor lettuce, which is the sort of main green lettuce that makes up the bulk of the salads that we have. And slugs, like with all lettuces, are a big fan of these. The other thing that I've also grown, which grows really well in winter, is Pak Choi. This is something that you can obviously use in stir fries, you can steam it, but you can also just eat it fresh, and we chop it up and put it in salads. This is the slug's absolute favourite. And to some extent, that does mean that the slugs concentrate on this crop rather than the others. But what I've done is, for as many of the plants as I can, I've surrounded them with eggshells. Eggshells that I've basically roasted for an hour or so whilst something else was cooking in the oven. Stick these in a tray, and then they become very brittle. Smash them up, and I've put them round. And the idea is that slugs just don't want to, slugs and snails, all kind of mollusks, don't want to climb over these jagged, dry shells, and so it protects your crop. But anyway, I've done that on a few of them. I've also left a few that haven't been protected just as a sort of control. But we'll see what happens. I don't know what the outcome is. I've used these outside, but as soon as it rains, they sort of spill all over the place. They get disrupted, and then they just don't work and stop slugs. But I'm wondering whether in the polytunnel they'll be a bit more effective. On this bed, we have salad rocket, which is just a really lovely spicy leaf that gives the salad a bit of an oomph. And we have some more interesting ones. This one is corn salad, which takes a long time to grow, but it's worth it because it has a really nutty, delicious flavour, so that's definitely worth going. And the final one that I've got to put in here is winter purslane, so I'm just doing that at the moment. The central bed is basically my experimental herbs. I've got parsley here, and we've also got coriander, and then, as I said before, some spring onions to see how they go. So one thing that's worth mentioning is that I've concentrated the crops at this end of the polytunnel because this is where we get the most sunshine during the day. Obviously in winter time there's quite a limited amount of sunshine because the sun's so low on the horizon, so there's not many hours during the day where you get sunlight. These crops don't have to grow large, but still the more light the better, so I've kept them at this end of the polytunnel to maximize their growth. So as you can see, it's easy to transition from summer to winter mode, but it's definitely worth doing because you can have fresh produce right through the year. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, don't forget to smash the like button. It really helps us as a small channel, helps us to grow and for YouTube to tell other people about our content. And if you want to see more content about self-sufficiency and no-dig growing and that kind of thing, don't forget to subscribe. Alright, many thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.